I'd like to call our,
Are we
sorry?
live? Are we live?
We are live, and from what it says in the top of my screen, it says that we are streaming as well.
Yeah.
So good morning all, and welcome to our first official board meeting of the year. And I'd like to call it to order, please. Mr. Secretary, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Board minutes, Mr. Secretary?
Yes. Like to make a motion that we ratify the board minutes from our previous meeting.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, thank you. For those of you that are seeing the square marked IMC, that is our administrative management company, and they help us set up the board meetings, the minutes, the board packages, the dues, what have you. So welcome aboard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And like I said, welcome to our first formal board meeting of the year. And I kind of feel like this is a state of the association meeting, or just to get everybody on the same page for what's up this year. We had a brief organizational meeting in January, during which we warmly welcomed Lori Wellinghoff. Raise your hand, Lori, you got your little name there. And Jonathan Surrey. Welcome, Jonathan. And we bid farewell to Paul Crunkleton and Barry Barth, two very important members of the board, and we will miss them. I'd like to thank everyone for voting during the election, for participating in the election, and also for using our electronic ballot for the first time. We feel like it did quite well. And I'd also like to thank you for allowing me to continue to do some of the work that began in the last 3 years. So I'm very grateful on that. We also re-elected 2021 officers for the year, and they are myself as president, Grover Todd as treasurer, who could not be with us today, Greg Thompson as secretary, and Dave Ellis as vice president. We're looking around Sea Pines, and we see an awful lot of activity going on. And I've got just a couple of bullets for instances. We've got a very successful land use monitoring effort going on, and the property owner response rate is very high. And you're going to see more of that in the upcoming land use report. We also have an election coming up this year for our town council representative, since Tom Lennox has said that he is not running for re-election. We have new short-term rental policies coming into play. We have CSA considering methods to increase revenues to provide services to our community. We have an upcoming opening of the Quarter Deck restaurant, which is pretty special, I think. And we have a lawsuit contesting the recent referendum. Sea Pines is one of the largest tax bases on the island. And our town council representative plays now and will play a critical role in the quality of life here where we live. So, as the voice of property owners, we need to provide you with information that you can trust. Therefore, once all the candidates are declared, Sea Pines POA will host a debate and all property owners will be invited. With regard to a new parking policy that limits cars to parking on the hardscape portion, such as the driveway of a home's yard, this initially is directed to short-term renters. Sea Pines POA welcomes this action, but as a first start. We have communicated to CSA that we support it as long as it is only the first step in addressing parking for all property owners in the future. And we insisted that that was in the language as it was introduced. It has also become apparent that CSA is still experiencing a revenue shortfall. I believe that you would agree with me that just from our own personal experiences, the cost of living is accelerating with no end in sight right now. Social Security got a 6% increase, while the CPI, which is how our annual assessment is adjusted, only increased about 4%. So I think it's kind of awkward and probably more weird that we get a bigger raise from Social Security than CSA does from the CPA. I mean, when you really think about it. The new quarter deck restaurant is still on schedule to open prior to the Heritage. I received a question regarding the parking in Harbor Town, and the resort is creating up to 200 parking spaces. It'll be between 150 and 200. And what is now used is the employee parking lot. If you're driving into Harbor Town, you'll see a gravel parking lot on your right prior to the bakery. And the employees, right now, employees are parking there, and they will start busing the employees in shifts for their shifts. With regard to the lawsuit that's going on right now, the Jinx lawsuit, there is some movement. We are engaged in discovery, and the depositions of all parties are being scheduled. The Jinx deposition occurred last week. We have also been asked by our members, what is the position on short-term rentals? Well, the answer is we live by our covenants, and they're in the covenants. So let's look at that situation for a minute. Sea Pines was the first, the most famous, the most award-winning master plan community in the world. And I don't think that that's an overstatement. Also, Sea Pines was the first to introduce an overriding set of covenants that run with the land. Our covenants expressed a mighty concept of environmentally sound rules to live by. They were written by Charles Fraser's team, the developers. They weren't written by property owners. So we have two sort of what I'm going to call aha moments. No one, and I don't think really, I repeat, no one could have predicted in 1974 what Sea Pines would look like today and how it would function today. Second, couple that with the tight controls that the developers put in place, that the actual execution of the covenants has created issues over the years. There have been amendments and additional covenants added, but we are still living with what I would describe as a beautiful, innovative, yet faulty documents. As a matter of fact, who can read them? There are covenants and there are policies and there are court agreements. And I cannot attest that some are not written in conflict with others. We have seen up close the disadvantage created by some of the covenants. How many failed referenda did we have before one finally passed in January of last year? Just that single effort took over 10 years. It was a breath of fresh air to see that 88% approved the $600 per year referendum. Unfortunately, only to be brought to a complete halt by a property owner. We formed a referendum task force last summer, which I chaired. I did such a terrible job, it really wasn't until Paul Crunkleton accepted the challenge to chair last fall and is now co-chairing the task force along with Lee Stevens. And that's why anything is getting done. I'd like to officially welcome the task force members who, along with Lee and Paul, serve to recommend improvements for some of the existing covenant issues. And to thank them again for volunteering their time and talents to such a necessary endeavor. Our task force members, in addition to Lee and Paul, are Keith Burns, Barbara Ernie, Larry Games, John Hall, David Pardue, and Karen Saad. If you have any suggestions that should be looked at, please email info@seapinespoa.com and they will be forwarded to the task force. Thank you very much for listening. And let's move on to the financial report. As I mentioned, Grover Todd, our treasurer, is on a plane at the moment, so they will be presented by Brian Simpson of IMC.
Thank you, Paula. Looking at the December 31 balance sheet, your end of the year balance sheet here. And if you look at the top of the page, the first three lines are your bank accounts. They total $83,655. And I talked with Grover, that third one down, the replacement reserve, that's sort of like another savings account that we set up originally, and I don't think that one's going to be necessary, so I think we'll close that down and just have, we might possibly close the first operating AAB account as well, just so you have one operating account and your Morgan Stanley account, your investment account. At 12/31, the Morgan Stanley accounts totaled $360,090. So total cash, $400,000, $443,745. So that's total cash at the end of the year. I will point out that the advance payments line 20201, those are membership dues that were collected in 2021 that we've moved to 2022. So they sit in this advance payments till this year, and now we've moved them to income, which will be on your budget variance that I'll cover in a second. We paid off the CSA payable line. We paid that off in January. So that's gone to zero. And I don't think we make any more payments to them, right, Paula? I think we're totally done with CSA. Yep, okay. I'll move on to the budget variance for the end of the year. Your membership dues came in at 174 on a budget of 177,000. Your big variance, you had the legal fee issue, so that's your biggest unfavorable variance on the budget variance. The next big one is the communications expense was $18,000 over budget. The bottom line, you guys, I think the insurance was over another 10,000. So at the very bottom, revenue over expense, you came in at a negative 4,100 on a budget of 31,000. So most of that is legal fees. So that's where you ended up the year. I have in front of me some 2022 numbers that you guys are looking at, and I'll just touch on them briefly. We have collected about 36,000 in membership dues in January. So if we add that to the 2021 numbers that we got in, you got a total of 113,269. And I heard that we've received another 14,000 over the weekend that hasn't posted yet. So that's going to take you to about 127,000 on a budget of 174,000 for the year. So that's a lot better numbers than we looked at last time, Paula. We've got a lot of influx in income coming in January. And
Yes, I'd like to note though that was it like 45,000 shortfall is a lot to catch up with.
Yeah, we only have the numbers from when we took over in July. So I don't know what the first half of last year looked like, but we'll just keep an eye on it and report back how it's going. But we have gotten a lot just in the last couple of weeks, so hopefully that'll keep coming in.
Thank you. And I guess I should also publicly state that what you're getting, the checks that you're getting was from a bill that we sent out where it should have been noted that membership is voluntary. And I'm thrilled that people are voluntarily sending their checks in.
All right. Well, that's about all I got financial wise. You guys have any questions on last year's numbers or anything in general?
Thank you, Ryan, very much.
Okay, thank you.
IMC, we started a transition with IMC in August and sort of get their feet wet August through the end of the year. And effective January, they really are the management company that are providing the day-to-day interface with our membership. And so I've added to the agenda a management report. Kathleen Smith is our account executive with IMC. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you. Very briefly, we continue to respond to phone calls and emails. We have brought in Lisa Martin, who is to my right, to assist on the day-to-day operations for Sea Pines POA. The recent phone calls and emails did have a lot to do with the billing that was sent out, and as Paula just confirmed, that was a voluntary membership. It's a voluntary membership. So that was a lot of the questions that we've been receiving. We've had a lot of great feedback after providing some additional information on the organization, providing the website to potential members. And we've seen a lot of positive feedback with thanks for the explanation. And I think we're bringing in a lot of new members on top of the renewals. We'll continue to field those phone calls and emails. You all have an annual meeting coming up that we will be looking into and getting with the board on to make sure we're sending out proper notice to all of the members. So we'll just keep pushing along as we have been.
Do you have the date of record for the annual meeting, please?
The date of the annual meeting is Friday, April 8th.
And so the date of record would be March 8th then, 30 days ahead of time?
Yes, the notice has to be sent out. We'll send it out 30 days prior to the meeting.
Okay. Okay, what is the traffic like on emails and calls? What would the average be per week, do you think, in terms of what you're working with, what you have to handle?
I'd say phone calls, we're getting 50 to 75 calls a week. Emails are a little less, maybe, well, probably about 50 emails a week, I would say. Before the billing went out, it was a little less than, probably maybe a third of that. So sometimes we may even get more than 75 calls a week. So it really just depends on when people are checking their emails and going through their mail too.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
No problem.
Anything else?
I believe that's all I have.
Okay, great. Communications. Greg. Greg, you're on mute.
Thought
There
I
you go.
unmuted and I didn't. There we go. Thank you. I don't have a lot to report other than I think it's clear from the feedback we got from our solicitation for dues payment that a lot of people don't really understand who we are, what we do, and how we fit. So from a communication standpoint this year, I think it's important we raise our profile, get more people to visit our website, which I think is quite comprehensive and tells the story well of who we are and what we do. And I think that it's important to note that we had a workshop to start off the year and talked a lot about communications. And in fact, Lori Wellinghoff has volunteered to lead a task force and put together a comprehensive communication strategy for us which will be a nice addition when we're done. Kathleen, thanks for the work that you've done answering phone calls. And it's nice to hear that you all were prepared to tell people who we are, what we do, and why it's a good investment to pay your dues and become a member. I think that's it, Paula. That would complete my report.
Thank you. The communications, the function is so critical. Because whether people come to our website, if we can get them to come to our website or push the information out to them, either way, I don't think that requirement ever goes away. So I'm thinking that this should be a standing committee. Our task forces are a little bit more nimble. They sort of come in and work on an issue and then disappear. So I'd like to put a standing committee up there for consideration with a charter that we can approve. Any thoughts on that? Okay.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, and Jonathan, I'd like to welcome Jonathan also, who has volunteered as our website coordinator. So he will be a little busy, as well as Lori. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Dana, question?
Yeah. No, not a question, just to encourage the folks watching to check out the website. Not only does it talk about our organization, but there's a new resource page, Neighbors Helping Neighbors, on the website, which is just a resource of if you need help in an area, elderly care, all kinds of things are there. You are concerned about safety issues from the community point of view, or you want local resources, getting a ride to the doctor, all kinds of links to local organizations are provided that might be useful for the public.
Okay, thank you. Membership committee, Lee.
Yeah, the membership committee has not had a meeting since our last board meeting, so I have nothing new to report there, but we will be restarting the committee in 2022.
Thank you very much. Covenant Reform Task Force. Lee, busy,
Yep.
busy dude here.
I'll stay with that. So the covenant, as you mentioned earlier, the Covenant Reform Task Force met actually pretty regularly in the second half of last year. There were a group of 8 of us, I believe, and people were very passionate about some of the things that they thought were needed to be addressed or at least discussed relative to the covenants. And out of that, the committee identified 8 specific areas that they thought needed to be looked into in more detail, and made the recommendation that those areas be addressed by individual task forces on each topic. And that has been transmitted to you, that list, for the board to consider, and we'll sure address that at a future workshop. So we expect that as the year goes on, there will be opportunities, a lot of opportunities for our members to participate in task forces on the individual 8 topics that will be released as to areas of the covenants that we think at least need to have more detail around what could possibly be done.
Yes, thank you for that, Lee. And I'd also like to say there'll be ample opportunity for our members to weigh in on some of this. We have taken surveys in the past off of our newsletters. We will continue to do so, maybe even a separate survey instrument from SurveyMonkey. And it's just critical that we have all of your email addresses. If you're not hearing from us, just info@cpines.com or call us. All that information is on our homepage, and give us the information, and you will be totally up to date on what's happening with Sea Pines POA. So thank you. The next report, at the end of 2021, CSA formed a formal land use management committee, and we are no longer a joint committee. So it is the CSA Land Use Management Committee on the agenda. It is no longer joint. And Dana, Dana, who is our representative on the committee, if you could give us a readout. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you, Paula. So just to take off from where Paula left off on this, just changing it to a CSA only land use management committee. I don't want anyone in the listening world to think that that means we are any less involved as a POA, because as the representative for the POA on that committee, the charter was revised to make sure that there is always a standing member of the POA board that serves on that committee as part of the charter, as well as there's always been a member of the ARB on that. So, and in addition, several people on this board are serving as members. Jonathan Surrey, Lee Stevens, and newly member Lori Wellinghoff. So they are part of the 9 residential members that are included in the roster of the committee. So it's a very active committee. It's I think one of the more important ones. We've had 44 meetings since this committee was first started as an ASPO joint CSA committee. And the first one of the year was held last week on February 9th. And Greg, who's a member here, is also on the CSA board and is now the chair of that committee. He asked me, and I gratefully accepted to be vice chair. And we continue to have Alex Cruden as the secretary. These minutes are published on the CSA website, and they're very easy to find. So some other changes that have happened is that the land use monitor, Ryan Cash, now reports under Russell Fredericks. So that's something that may be of interest to the community. And the new head of our committee, Greg, introduced challenges for the committee this year. And there are 3 main challenges that we're going to be focusing on. The first is continuous improvement. The second is to raise community awareness. And the third is rapid and consistent enforcement of the land use rules. If you look in your packet of information that was sent out for this meeting, you'll see a pie chart showing the violations that were cited in the months of November, December, and January. And these are violations that Ryan Cash, our land use monitor, who works for CSA and also paid somewhat by ARB, has listed. And the number 1 continues to be landscaping. Number 2 in terms of prevalence is maintenance, and 3rd is mailbox violations, just poorly maintained mailboxes, poorly painted, whatever. And so those total 75% of all the violations for those 3 months, a total of 103 violations. And what is very important to note is that all but a small handful of these violations are taken care of as pretty much as soon as the property owner receives notification of them. They at least begin to clear them up pretty shortly thereafter, which speaks well of our community. The other point last point that I wanted to bring up is, and you'll read about this in the meeting minutes if you go to that, and that is that there is a task force that was set up the end of last year that continues the work. It's being headed up by Ed Warner, and it includes Lee Stevens from our board on that task force, and the task force is on the topic of roadside barriers. It's something that may not be clearly understood by property owners, but it is the responsibility by the ARB guidelines and is cited under Land Use Rule 7.3 that property owners are supposed to maintain their properties all the way to the roadside edge or the public beach walkway. However, their own property line doesn't extend all the way to those points. There's actually a CSA right-of-way area that's owned by CSA. Nevertheless, it's the responsibility of the property owner to maintain that property. And that is a challenge for property owners, given the narrow roadways that we have. And often people will try to protect the edges of their properties by various means. If you look at Land Use Rule 7.3, it talks about some of the things that property owners should avoid using to prevent any kind of safety hazard to either vehicles or pedestrians or bicyclists, and to also ensure clear visibility of the roads. There's an obvious, over the years, people have tried to erect barriers or have erected different types of barriers, posts, whatever, on the edges of their property that are in violation of this. But there's clearly a need in some cases, or a desire by property owners to have some type of barrier that delineates where their property is to try to protect it. So this task force is looking at that issue and seeing if there are possible options that could be proposed as serving as protective barrier tools that CSA and ARB would agree could be used. And what those items might be and how they might be approved, how they might be installed, all of that is under discussion. I'd like to ask if Lee would like to comment any further on that.
Thanks, Anna. No, I think you've covered it pretty well, and we have further, discussion of that coming up. So I think I'll leave it with your comments.
Okay, so I just want our property owners to know that while the rules have been established and approved by CSA and are being clearly enforced with Ryan Cash's capable work, we know that our work isn't done, and we're continually working to improve our community, and we want to make sure that we listen to what your needs are and what you want. Greg, I'd also like to let you end the discussion as the new chair, and I'm excited that Greg is the new chair. I think he'll do a great job.
Well, thank you, Tana. I couldn't have done a better job summarizing the work of the committee and where we're headed than you did. I'm very thankful that you agreed to serve as the vice chair. I'm new, and I think that's somewhat of an advantage. I'm not stuck in the history, but I think it's useful to have history inform your decisions as you go forward. And Dana's just a wealth of knowledge, and the people on the committee are great. They're all committed, and so I'm excited. So thank you for your summary.
Thank you.
Dana, thank you. I just had a quick question on mailboxes and mailbox violations. Is it requested or suggested anywhere that when people move in or move out, I guess move in, that they put their name on the mailbox? I see a couple that have names of people I know moved, a year or two ago.
But that's an interesting question. And when we were looking at how to word the rule about mailbox maintenance, I actually had to go to the United States Postal Service website to find out what is required in terms of labeling. Yeah. And you really, the name on the mailbox is not necessarily a requirement. So that's why the way it's worded, the rule is properly labeled. The most important thing is, of course, the street number be there. it's a simple thing to request the name be changed. You can just put, you don't have to put your own name. You can put the street number. You can do anything like that. You can, it can be a more anonymous change, but there's
But
no
we don't have anything that sort of
mandate.
mandates that. Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Dana, but I thought it does mandate that if the incorrect information needs to be removed.
I'll have to check on that. I'll look at the rule and get back to you before
Yeah.
the meeting.
I kind of remember that there, whether it's in the, when it was in the old rules, I'm assuming it carried over, but I don't know that you can't leave your mailbox with somebody else's name on it.
I'll check and have the answer in a minute.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll come back. All righty, we're going to move on to the CSA Short-Term Rental Committee. Dave Ellis, do you have anything to report today?
Well, the committee actually hasn't yet met this year. It'll be meeting shortly. All the committees get appointed at about this time and start having their first meeting. But as you all know, this is a very active topic around the community, issues that are related in some form or fashion with short-term rentals. It's, as everybody's noticed and discussed before, the number of short-term rentals seem to be increasing more and more so. That, as I said before, creates a lot of tension between the permanent residents and those who operate the business of short-term rentals. And it changes the nature of the community. Everybody needs to understand that short-term rentals have been interpreted by an actual court lawsuit years ago to be something that is permitted in CPANs. So it's nothing that that anybody can think of that in any way can prevent them or limit them. And it's a very difficult issue. And you will also know that from other information from CSA, that CSA is looking at methods of somehow charging fees on short-term rentals. These are businesses, just the same as the businesses we see in operating a restaurant or clothing store or anything else. They are in the nature of a business, but that's not the basis of it. The basis to me is that we have a large burden on our community that increases significantly when we have these large numbers of short-term rentals, as can be seen by security calls and the activity at the gates and the need for personnel. But the overriding issue to me is that there is a need for revenue to cover the cost of all of these type of things, including, as you mentioned earlier, Paula, that the inflation rate is much higher than what the CPI rate that CSA raised on the annual assessment. But even in addition, in CPINs, the inflation rate, the costs are even higher than the national all bucket inflation rate. We at this end of the island have to pay more for labor. We're in a hurricane area and our insurance has gone up, and anybody that's experienced what's happened in their insurance in the past few years understand that they're all going much higher than what the inflation rate is. So there are a lot of visitors that come to our community and who enjoy our community. And at least my personal belief is that those people ought to also share some of the cost of maintaining this community and the standard to which they would enjoy it, and to cover the cost that's associated with it. It's just a method that, we're either going to provide all of this cost from the homeowners themselves, or we're going to ask our visitors to, since they enjoy this area and we maintain it, and we, and they enjoy that maintenance and security, to share in, that cost. And that's my take on what's going on. But that's my personal opinion. That's not officially anything that is coming out of short-term rentals or anything else. But it will continue to be an active topic for a while, and maybe on into the future. As circulating now that People are coming to learn that there are sales of fractional interest in properties advertised by real estate agents. That's been going on for longer than now. That has been investigated and sent over to attorneys to see how that relates, whether it's a violation of the covenants or whether it could be prohibited. The whole issue of how people are finding ways to come to places like Hilton Head, some of which means to, they're grouping families together, as you know, and they come in large groups. And so we get houses stuffed with people to just as many as they could possibly sleep. And we get cars all over the place. And we get noise complaints, all of which rise substantially during the tour season. So it's a lot going on and a lot of things that have to be dealt with, and it's not easy. And it's going to be, that people are going to have opinions on it, but we have to deal with it and we have to find a way, and it's just not going to be ideal. There are a lot of people that like to prohibit it, and as I said, you can't. The covenants allow it, and and I'm one of those ones that, I wish we could put a brake on it, but it's not there. We have to accept reality, and we have to realize that our community has two classes of property owners, at least two classes. Those who own and live in their house, whether part-time or full-time, those who may live in the house part-time and rent the rest of the time, and those who are investors who have just bought property and rent it. And those are the property owners basically we've got. And we have to find a way of accommodating and making all of that work to the best we can. It is not easy, but it's a struggle, and we carry forth with trying to do that. I've said probably more than you wanted to hear, but it is a topic which I think bears everybody's thought, and there's going to be a lot of opinion on whatever happens. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
I think that was an excellent summary. Thank you, Dave. Okay, next, Architectural Review Board. Lee Stevens is our representative on the review board, one of our representatives on the ARB. Lee?
Yeah, so the ARB continues to be very active. You've probably seen a lot of construction. We're kind of catching up with other coastal communities in that when I first started to be on the ARB, when you saw a new single family residence being built, it was because somebody bought a vacant lot. Now we're starting to see tear downs. So people are buying homes that were built in the 70s, particularly more toward the ocean front, and tearing them down, buying the lot, tearing it down, and building some of the what could appear to be larger homes, although in some cases they're not square footage wise larger, but because they're being built at a 14-foot height to start with, they look bigger than ones that were built on grade. So there's quite a few single family residences that are being built. We continue to see, particularly with the real estate market right now, a lot of renovations. And the one that's become my pet peeve is we've seen a large proliferation of swimming pools. And this all relates in some way back to what David was just talking about, that the short-term rentals are being driven by what they can get for rent, and real estate agents are telling their and management companies are telling the owners that if you put a swimming pool in, you can get a higher rent. We continue at ARB to look at swimming pools. If a swimming pool meets the setback requirements, we have no way to deny that. But we do look at if a pool needs a variance to fit, what's the impact on the neighbors. The other thing is relating to short-term rentals or rentals in general is that the ARB has no purview on use. So although somebody may ask at a meeting, is this going to be a rental property? That's really not our consideration. We can't consider that. An owner is an owner. What they do with it is up to them. And all we're looking at is the architectural and the setbacks, and that it meets the ARB guidelines. And there's nothing in the ARB guidelines relating to a rental property versus a property that's either a part-time or full-time owner. The one thing that ARB does have purview over to some extent is parking. And the current guidelines for any new construction is one parking space, a parking space for one minus the number of, one less than the number of bedrooms. So if you're building a 5-bedroom house, you need to have 4 parking spots. If you're building a 7-bedroom house, you need to have 6 parking spots off the street, and a garage is included. So if you have a 2-car garage, that's 2 of your parking spots. But other than that, and I know that from the Covenant Reform Task Force, parking is one of the major issues that's come into play as far as the covenants are concerned. And that's the way that it's been addressed, at least at this point, via the ARB guidelines. Any questions? Great.
No questions. Thank you very much, Lee. Okay, let's look at some unfinished business here. We wish it were finished, but it's not because it's going through the courts. So Dana, could you give us an update on 88 Lawton?
Well, the update on that is that the property has not been remediated as per the lawsuit that we won back in March of last year, stipulated. Therefore, a contempt of court document has been submitted to the judge, and we're waiting for a final ruling on that.
Any idea, is there a timeline with that? I know that COVID is messed up with court timelines as well, but
I wouldn't have any idea about
yeah,
that.
no saying. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And just, I just want to disclose again, because the Sea Pines POA feels very strongly about these precedents that need to be set through the court. We are funding half of this lawsuit, which will help enable future situations to be resolved more quickly. New business, I put down 2 things. One is a lecture series, and I mentioned having a debate or a lecture or some form, some way of communicating with the people who are or will be running for our town council seat. Sea Pines makes up a majority of their territory district, which is being redistricted right now. We don't know what the final is. At this point, it looks like we're picking up a little bit more of Coligny and dropping a little bit of maybe the Tide Point area. I'm not sure where it will end up, but I know it's an important part of how we vote and how we're represented. So that was one of the things I mentioned. I also feel like there's a lot going on at Town Hall. And Dave mentioned one thing, which was the research that they were doing into short-term rentals. So it might be an appropriate time to invite Mark Orlando to come speak with the members, with the property owners and members of Sea Pines POA. So we can talk a little bit about what his vision is for the development at the south end of the island. Another one that would be appropriate, I believe, to come speak would be Steve Birdwell, who is president of the Sea Pines Resort. The resort has a lot going on as well with their development, and it would be a nice time for him to perhaps catch us up to date on that, and also give us some insight into their relationship with the property owners. They do an awful lot they provide discounts, some allocations of tea times, things like that. They're in the covenants, but they're also doing things that are not in the covenants, such as the discounts that are going on right now in their food and beverage with their restaurant properties. So those were some suggestions. And it's certainly easy enough to invite them and set it up in the community center via Zoom as well as in person. And again, we would solicit questions. If you have other suggestions, please let us know, and we can certainly address some of that as well. I was also contacted by ARB. They have a tree mitigation fund. When you file plans with the ARB for consideration, I'm sorry, no. When you have a tree removed, you have to pay $50, I believe it is, and it goes to this tree mitigation fund. And annually they will deliver to CSA some funds for tree mitigation. So if you have any ideas, if you have any suggestions, board, I'm talking directly to the board right now, but if anybody listening also has any suggestions of areas that would benefit from new tree plantings, please let us know. Are there any questions on the new business? Okay, moving right along. We will take questions if we've received any. I'll check, Kathleen, if you could, oh, I'm sorry, Dana.
Before we go to questions, can I can go back to the mailbox question?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Okay. In rule 7.1, under overall property appearance, there's a rule about mailboxes. I'll just read it, it's pretty short. Mailboxes and mailbox posts shall be properly labeled and maintained in good repair as per CSA standards. A CSA approved street number sign shall be posted at each property, easily visible from the road, and shall be properly maintained in good repair. Contact CSA maintenance for mailbox/post repair, maintenance, or label change, as well as street number sign repair or replacement.
Okay.
So the way this reads is properly labeled, and for proper, the reason that wording was selected is because it really defers to the United States Postal Service requirement for what is required to be properly labeled, and that could change. And so we just deferred to that, but it needs to be labeled so it's legible. It's a clean, well-maintained, well-painted mailbox post. But what I wanted to, and it's easy to get this fixed. If you have a problem or it's poorly maintained or you're missing or you have a terrible little street number sign, just contact CSA maintenance to work that out. They take care of all of that to their standards. What I wanted to just take a minute to educate the public about is those little street number signs, those little square brown signs with the white letters. Those are really important that they're present and that they're well maintained on and placed on every property. And that's for safety reasons. It's so dark in this community that those are designed so that they reflect light, so that if there's an emergency vehicle and you need to find your property, they can look for those in the day or in the night. They know exactly what to look for and can be found very quickly. People sometimes like to have more decorative numbers, or maybe they don't like the little brown sign, or they've let it fall into disrepair, the shrubs are overgrown on it. I just really want to encourage everybody. This is for safety reasons. It's not for beauty. And those little signs are very important. So please contact CSA maintenance if yours is missing or in need of repair at any way at all. And they are really quick about getting those signs out. Lee.
Yeah, I kind of recall from our debate in land use management when we came up with the wording that properly means that it be accurate. Therefore, if you move into a house and your name is Jones and it says Smith on the mailbox, it's not properly labeled. And therefore, there is the requirement for you. You don't have to put your name on it, but you need to have the other one removed. And all you have to do is call maintenance to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Lee.
Thank you. That clears it up, but that's also very interesting about the house numbers. You know, every meeting I go to, I don't care when or where, I learn something new about this wonderful neighborhood. Thank you. So we'll be taking, it's been a short meeting. I'm not sure we need a recess. If there are any questions, we'll take them after adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So noted. Second, so noted. All those in favor? Thank you. Kathleen, are there any questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Are they coming in via email by any
Yes,
chance?
I received, there was one question. I did forward it over to you. Would you like me to read it or would you like to read it? Either way.
Here, I've got it. Okay, for Dave Ellis, doesn't the town of Hilton Head Island have an ordinance restricting the kind of fractional ownership now growing in sea pines? And would such a town ordinance supersede the lack of a sea pines rule or covenant? And this is from Alex Cruden.
Alex, I don't know for sure whether the town has a fractional ownership ordinance. If it does, there's a permit that they have to get and comply with law and what they're doing. So I'm assuming that it's not in violation of anything when they get their permit to do business, and if it's conducted as a business. Remember, if they do use it as rentals, under the present state law, it's going to have a business license with the town. And that's some people's concern, is that it's going to be used as rental property. But I'm not sure what the town's position on that fractional ownership is.
A follow-on to that, Dave, because I keep hearing differing things. Now, this question said if the town has a certain ordinance or policy in place, that trumps covenants or HOA rules in the gated communities. I mean, I've heard that the town legislates, regulates, whatever you want to say, outside the gates, and we do inside the gates, or when they come up with an ordinance or something, if they state specifically that it applies to all islanders, that's when they have to say that it trumps. Is it understood, not understood? Do you have any idea?
Well, I only have a partial reference to base any opinion on. One is, for example, the town has noise ordinances.
Yes.
And, we could not adopt a louder, decibel rating than the town allows, or because that does override it. We can do lower within the community, but not higher. So I think that's the theory I think would apply, is that, whatever the town ordinance is that if whether they can make it applicable to just a community or not, I don't know. That seems like special legislation, and in most states I've been familiar with, it's very difficult to have that regulation. It has legislation. It has to be uniform throughout the community. But I'm not sure of that. I'd just be guessing. I'm not licensed to practice in South Carolina, so I just don't know exactly.
Okay.
So I'm speculating just like a lot of other people would.
Okay, yeah, and I am too. That might be a good question for Mr. Orlando, should he accept an invitation to come speak. So we'll see. So there was one question. Are there any more?
No, ma'am. That's the only one that we received.
All right. We're good. Thank you for your time this morning, ladies, gentlemen, and for those that are viewing. And we do want to hear from you. We read our emails, we respond to our phone calls. Please use info@seapines.com, and our phone number. Kathleen, can you please recite the phone number for people as well?
Oh gosh, you caught me off guard because I'm always looking at it.
Yeah, I know. I'm sitting here going, what was it again?
It is, oh gosh, why didn't it show up?
Oh, wait a minute, I got it.
Thank you.
843-422-7648. Okey doke. Thank you all very much and good morning.
Good morning. Goodbye.
Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.